Making consistently tasty espresso actually has less to do with the equipment you use and more to do with getting the basics right. And it doesn't matter whether you're a professional or you're just making yourself a coffee at home. If you get these 3 fundamentals right, you'll be making better tasting coffee than someone who has all the gear and no idea. So let's start with the most basic rule of delicious coffee. It is so basic that I wish I didn't have to mention it at all, but trust me, I do. And I'm talking about the coffee itself. Here's the thing, we frequently get questions from people who are wondering why the coffee from their $7,000 espresso machine isn't tasting very good. They're surprised to find out that the cheap pre-ground coffee that they're using is the real problem. So here's a quick checklist to make sure that we've got this sorted. Number 1, buy a quality whole bean coffee that has a roast date printed on the bag. Number 2, grind it right before you brew it. Number 3, once you've opened the pack, store any leftover beans in an airtight container. Now we've talked about coffee storage in more detail previously, and I'll link to that down below for more on that. But for now, let's say if you're not going to start with quality, fresh ingredients, then all other details aren't going to count for much. When I say the word extraction, it sounds kind of technical, but all I really mean is that we want to brew the coffee in a way that brings out the best balance of sweetness, acidity, and bitterness. When we push hot water through ground coffee, some of that coffee dissolves into the water. Pretty obvious, right? I mean, it's brown. But to get the best flavor, we want to control how much is extracted from the ground coffee. In simple terms, if we don't extract enough from the ground coffee, then we get a shot of espresso that is overly acidic. If we extract too much, then we get espresso that is overly bitter. So we're looking for the literal sweet spot in the middle. There are only 2 essential factors that have the biggest impact on extraction. 1, the ratio of ground coffee to brewing water, also known as the brew ratio. And 2, the time it takes for the shot to pour, known as the extraction time. To control the brew ratio and the extraction time, you first have to measure them. And the easiest way to do that is with a set of scales and a timer. Now, scales do not have to be fancy or expensive, but they do make this process so much easier. And many roasters provide a brew recipe for the coffee that you're using. And that is, they can recommend the amount of ground coffee, the amount of liquid espresso, and the extraction time that they use. If they don't, then a good generic double espresso recipe that works with a lot of coffees is 20 grams of ground coffee, 40 grams liquid espresso, and 25-second extraction time. It's a good starting point. I cover the specifics of measuring and adjusting process in more detail in a separate video, and I'll link that down below. But for now, just be aware that these numbers are really just a starting point. It's good to experiment with this and find the balance that tastes best to you. But once you learn how to control the extraction, then you're already most of the way to making a consistently delicious coffee. That is assuming you get the next bit right. Honestly, for many baristas, cleaning should be number 1 on that list, simply because it is so underappreciated. There is no easier way to get instantly better tasting coffee than to simply give your machine a proper clean. Keyword is proper. Many people will run some water through the group head, wipe out the portafilter and think, job done. But the job is not done. And that's because coffee coats everything it touches. And that old coffee residue quickly adds a bitter, metallic taste to every coffee you make after that. You can do everything else right, but if the machine is not properly clean, it's gonna taste like you're drinking from an ashtray. And that's where the magic white powder, in this case we call espresso cleaner, comes in. By flushing a small amount of this powder through the group and using it to clean the portafilter and baskets, we can quickly get rid of any coffee residue and get things tasting like they should. Unfortunately, you usually can't get proper espresso cleaner at the supermarket, so you'll need to buy it online or through your local coffee roaster. Just note that the espresso cleaner is a completely different thing to descaler, which is an acid designed to remove limescale buildup. This is doing a very different job, and it's not what we're talking about here. But long story short, get the real thing, your coffee will thank you. Now, most pro baristas clean the machine like this at least once a day. Well, that is the baristas who care about how their coffee tastes. But at home, the frequency comes down to how often you use it and your own personal tolerance for bitterness. but I would suggest cleaning it with espresso cleaner at least once a week. With all this talk of fundamentals, I know that there are some people out there who will say something like tamping or water temperature or a shiny new distribution tool that makes the biggest difference. But for me, if you start with a quality, fresh coffee, adjust it correctly and brew it on a clean machine, then you've made it most of the way to making consistently tasty coffee. And if you want to master that, then you should definitely click right here and I can show you how to take the next step in learning those skills. I'm going to clean this machine now. Yeah, it's already clean.